I'm quite an outdoorsy person, and so is my family, and we go on family camping trips every summer. I'm an experienced hiker and outdoorsman, and I frequently visit trails and parks, sometimes by myself, just to get my mind off things. I'm a teacher, so I have winter, summer, and spring break off, where I can take multiple day trips and camp somewhere. This occurred during winter break. It had snowed heavily, and the weather was cold, but in a magical Christmas way. I was going through a tough time in my life, so just to have something nice to do, I went out to a wooded area with my trailer to camp. It was a pleasant surprise to see that the park was void of people clearly not wanting to be in the cold weather. Me, on the other hand, had loved the snow and cold. It's just peaceful for me. I booked my campground spot for 3 nights. On the second night, it was amazing. The snow was nice and soft, and the moon was bright. It was perfectly bright enough to see almost the entire forest with a gentle blue glow. I just had to go on a night walk. That's how nice of a scene it was. The trails around the area go pretty far, so I left just after sundown. Most of the walk was uneventful. At the 2/3 mark of the trail, I heard a sound coming from the trees, a barely noticeable huff like something had been startled. I was surprised and immediately thought that it was another hiker. I looked in the direction of the noise, and if I were to tell you that I was so scared I heard ringing in my ears, it would be an understatement. I only saw his silhouette. He was tall, freakishly tall, at least 8 feet tall, long arms going down to his knees, standing upright like a person. He had weirdly proportioned features, almost like what you see in skinwalker stories, except I don't think that's what it was. He stood there like he was shocked that I was there, like he had never seen a person before. He wasn't aggressive, but more curious. I looked at him like I had never seen anything like him. We were almost parallel to each other in our reaction. He tilted his head slightly and leaned forward to get a better look. We were 20 feet away from each other, enough distance for me to at least get a head start if need be. I was still scared out of my mind, but I came to my senses enough to see that he wasn't aggressive, more curious than anything. I reached into my satchel and grabbed a piece of beef jerky and threw it at him. He took a step back and looked at it before slowly crouching down and grabbing it. He then started walking back into the dense forest. I wasted no time sprinting to the trailer, packing everything up, and booking it out of there. I didn't even care about checking out and canceling my last day. Since then, I've never been able to go back to the park without thinking about him, who he was, if he was real or a figment of my tired imagination. It was my friend's 17th birthday. He's really into camping and various other outdoor activities. I was invited along with a few other friends, but because it was a really busy time of the year before graduation, only 4 of us ended up going. It was my friend and myself, and then his 13-year-old brother, who had also brought a friend. We camped at a lake out of town, a little bit into the woods. The spot we camped in was a small clearing. It wasn't an actual official camping spot, but it worked well nevertheless. We ended up cutting our own firewood from nearby trees. We didn't want to, but my friend forgot firewood, and we didn't have any cell phone service where we were. If you've ever cut down trees with smaller camping saws and hatchets, you know it takes a while, even with the 4 of us. Over the course of 4 hours, we acquired quite a collection of firewood, so when the sun started to set, we got hungry and wanted a fire. The fire took an hour to start. Thanks to the rain that morning, the woods was very damp. Eventually, with the help of some hand sanitizer in my backpack and the wood drying out from our other attempted fires, we got a decent fire going. I remember being really relieved. We were really hungry and managed to cook up some hot dogs and bacon. We were quite tired from the day of cutting down small trees, so we retired to our large tent pitched in the clearing. We fell asleep very fast, but around 2 in the morning, I woke up from a really cold and loud wind. I remember struggling around in my sleeping bag trying to find a comfortable position or trying to stay warm. I ended up just lying in bed for what seemed like hours, unable to sleep, until suddenly I heard a loud snapping of a branch, which I just put off as a small animal. I mean, we were in the middle of the forest, so it made sense at the time. Anyways, around 3 minutes later, I heard it again, but just a little closer. I thought about waking my friend or his brother up, but being me, I didn't want to be rude and wake them up just in case it was just an animal. That's when I heard distinct footsteps that sounded maybe 10 or 15 feet away. At this point, a chill ran up my spine, and I instantly thought, what if it's a cougar or a bear? As living where we were in Canada, it wouldn't be uncommon. Nevertheless, I was a little scared. Now, it's worth noting that my friends and I all had decent-sized knives on us, along with various other sharp objects, like our hatchet and compound bow. At this point, I kept hearing these footsteps very slowly, so I armed myself with my knife and put my friend's hatchet through my belt loop. I slowly unzipped the tent, slipped my shoes on, and decided to check it out. That probably wasn't the best choice looking back on it now, but I was trying my best to be brave. Gripping my knife, I creeped outside into the cold night. For a minute, I searched around the tent, finding nothing. So I decided to take a pee as long as I was up, and then after I was done, I started back towards the tent, and then heard another branch snap. Trying not to be loud, I called out, "Who's there?" No response. So I started to walk towards the sound, when I saw the dark silhouette of a large, what looked like middle-aged man. I panicked and called out, "Who are you?" while raising my knife. The man rotated his body towards me before he turned around and sprinted off down the trail towards the parking lot. I stood there shocked for a minute. I didn't sleep much that night, waking up constantly. In the morning, I told my friend, his brother, and his brother's friend. They were very shocked by this, but my friend's brother told me around 1 in the morning he also heard footsteps and branches. Who knows what that man's intentions were for 4 teenagers camping in the woods? Maybe he was on drugs or another camper nearby, which I really doubt. What creeps me out the most about this incident is that in that area where he was standing, which I checked in the morning, was where I found my friend's brother's sweater on the ground. He claimed he didn't put it there, and I don't think the wind moved it there. In the summer of 1988, my aunt was a college student in Utah. She and her boyfriend, who later became my uncle, went camping with another couple in a park about 40 minutes south of Salt Lake City. They picked a spot, set up their tents, and planned to stay the night. It started raining hard early in the evening. A lot of people packed up and left, but my aunt and her group decided to wait it out. After a while, the rain stopped, so they made a small campfire and tried to enjoy the night. They talked, ate, and passed the time. Later, after it got dark, the rain started again. This time, the other couple didn't want to deal with it. They packed up and left, saying they'd rather drive back than sleep in the storm. My aunt and her boyfriend chose to stay. They put out the fire, got into their tent, and tried to settle in for the night. The rain kept coming down, steadily and loudly onto the tent. At some point, my aunt heard something that didn't match the sound of the rain. She said it was footsteps. At first, she thought she imagined it, but then she heard it again. It sounded like someone walking nearby, not too far from their tent. She sat up and listened, and then said that she saw a quick flash of light through the tent, like a flashlight turning on and off. She said her first thought was that it might be a park ranger coming to tell them to leave because of flooding. So she called out, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped right away. That woke up my uncle. She told him what she had heard. They couldn't hear much over the rain, and that made it harder to tell what was going on. They talked quietly about what to do. They were far from other campers, and there wasn't anyone close by to help. They agreed that if they heard anything again, they would leave. So they stayed still and listened. Minutes went by, and nothing happened. After a while, they started to calm down and laid back down to try to sleep. Sometime later, both of them woke up at the same time. They heard the tent zipper slowly being unzipped. Someone was opening the tent from outside. She screamed, and my uncle reacted right away. He grabbed the heavy metal flashlight that he kept next to him, and he swung it towards the door as hard as he could. The flashlight hit something solid, and they heard a person gasp, then the sound of someone running away into the rain. They got out of the tent and ran towards their truck, which was parked about half a mile away. It was still raining, and they didn't stop until they reached it. When they got there, they found one of the back tires had been slashed. They didn't have many options, so they got in and drove anyway. Somehow, by going slowly, they managed to make it out of the park and reached a gas station a few miles away. They used a payphone to call 911 and report what happened. The next day, they went back with the police to collect their things. The officers looked around the campsite and found footprints all around their tent. They said the prints appeared to belong to a man, but they never found out who it was. During a camping trip with friends years ago, we witnessed something we couldn't explain. We were sitting around the fire deep in the forest off a logging road in British Columbia. We were not drinking or smoking, as it was a dry trip for a friend. I noticed my good friend went silent and perked up like he was listening. He told us to shut up and listen. The forest was dead quiet with zero noise. Before, there had been frogs, birds, and regular forest sounds. He said something like, "Guys, there could be a cougar or bear around because the forest is silent. We might want to move to our cars." Before anybody could react, in the far tree line maybe 100 feet away, we saw something that completely put us all in shock. It was a small red orb, glowing like fire, producing its own light going between the trees. We watched it flabbergasted. It was clearly passing behind and in front of trees. It lasted maybe 20 seconds, then slowly faded. After about 10 seconds, the forest sounds resumed. We all just sat there in shock after that. We took a very quick look around, and there was no road or anything in the woods. It couldn't have been cars or any other vehicle. It freaked us out so much we left and found a campsite with people and stayed there. We still bring it up from time to time when we get together. It gave me nightmares for weeks. I have no clue what it could be, and it's a 50-50 shot if people believe it when we talk about it. A couple of additional points. We are all experienced campers and have done these trips for years. We've heard weird sounds, bright flashes in the sky, and encountered some sketchy people out in the bush before. Nothing unexplainable, but just wild stuff, so we knew how to react and think in these situations. The friend who noticed the lack of sound first is in the bush almost 6 months out of the year as he does forestry work, so he knows the woods more than anyone. He was terrified to go back to work for months after this experience. He never wanted to talk about it or mention it, as he said it made his hair stand up. So more about the light experience. When I say the forest was dead quiet, I mean completely quiet. I could hear the fire crackle lightly, but that was it. It was like the air had been sucked out of the forest itself. I could hear my heart beating. To go from so much sound to nothing instantly kicked in my fight or flight. It was primal. Something in the back of my head was like, this is a bad situation. Then, seeing that red light, it flickered and shined like a glass ball about the size of a beach ball filled with fire. It produced its own light, and a faint glow passed into the trees as it passed. It was traveling about walking speed between the trees. It was a heavy bushed area, so you'd hear someone walking through. Once my eyes locked onto it, I felt a fear I had never experienced. I'll say this, I almost died a couple of years back, and that wasn't as scary as this light. It was like my brain was trying to figure it out, but couldn't. Once it faded and the forest sounds resumed, everything in my body said to run. We barely said anything to each other as we all got up. We exchanged a few looks and words, and all confirmed what we saw. There were 6 of us. We decided to get a closer look, I guess out of the hopes there would be an explanation, but there wasn't. We couldn't explain it, and that made it worse. We left and found a paid campsite about 20 to 30 minutes away at around 1 a.m. In the morning, the owner of the campsite came by and greeted us, as people don't usually show up that late. We explained what happened sort of jokingly, as it seemed so strange. Her face turned to stone, and she was super serious after we explained. She explained that the forest we were in is an extremely old growth forest, which makes sense since my province has some of the oldest forests still standing in the world. She said it's not uncommon to hear stories like that. She asked a bunch of questions, and we talked about it for a while. I have no idea what or why, but it happened, and it was for sure there. We have on multiple occasions talked about it. I have no idea why, but it happened, and it was for sure there. We have on multiple occasions talked about it. Whenever we do talk about it, I have nightmares. Even just thinking about this and writing this gives me the creeps. In the mid to late 1970s, my parents were in a camping club with about 5 or 6 other couples, and they camped at various campgrounds together around the Midwest. One time, we went to this campground that had a little park near a large pond with a playground not far from the water. My sister and I were playing in a sandbox when I was around 10 years old, and she was a bit younger. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this boy, who was probably about 12 or 13, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans with patches on the knees, was standing in the sandbox a few feet from us. He had long black hair down to his shoulders and dark eyes. He didn't say anything for a couple of seconds, and my sister and I looked at him nervously, as he wasn't smiling and was staring down at us. He finally said something and asked if we were brother and sister, and I told him we were. He asked where our camper was, and stupidly, without thinking, I told him the section of the campground my parents' club was camping in, which was about 2 blocks away. He then asked the name of one of the couples camping in our parents' club and if we knew them. I told him yes, and the boy said that they were his aunt and uncle and he was going to surprise them later. He went on to say that he was camping with his dad, and he gestured vaguely in a direction on the other side of the pond. The kid squatted down close to my sister, and she backed up in the sand closer to me. He said, "Do you guys want to come to my camp? My dad brought tons of snacks, and I can give you marshmallows to roast if you want." I told him my parents already had marshmallows. This conversation went on for a bit, as he listed all the snacks that he had and wanted us to come and try them. My younger sister finally said she needed to go to the bathroom, which I took as my cue to get away from this weird kid who was really starting to make me feel uncomfortable, even at that young age. I told him, "We're going back now. We'll see you later when you come to your aunt and uncle's camper." He didn't get up when we got up, but instead leaned closer to us. He said, "There are bathrooms right down that road," pointing again past the pond. He added, "It's by where our camper is. You can take her there and stop by and get some candy from my dad." I told him there was a bathroom right over by the main office, which was just across the street from the playground, and I said we would just use that one. Suddenly, the boy jumped up, kicked whatever my sister and I had been building in the sand, and jumped out of the sandbox. He yelled, "You're so dumb! Who turns down free candy?" My sister and I rushed over to the office building, and I was fearful that he would follow us there. But after a few seconds of staring at us, he turned around and began to run down the path towards the other side of the pond. I took my sister into the men's room, she did her thing, and we cautiously looked around for the boy, who was nowhere to be seen, before we hurried back to our campsite. Once there, I told my parents about what happened, and our parents' friends happened to be sitting on the picnic table having coffee with them. We told them it was their nephew who was going to surprise them. Of course, they said they didn't have a nephew, and were a bit weirded out that someone knew who they were. My sister and I stayed at the campsite for the remainder of our time there, and of course the creepy kid never did come to our campsite.